So, you know what? I'll never forget this moment. My friend James, we're sitting there having coffee, and he looks at me and he goes, I bought a retirement home, and now I regret it. Just like that. I mean, this guy, he spent 2 whole years planning this thing out. Palm trees, ocean views, the works. Everything he'd been dreaming about since he was 45. And then at 55, he finally pulls the trigger on his dream retirement home. But get this. 2 years later, we're sitting in a little coffee shop in Bangkok, and he tells me it was the biggest financial mistake of his life. And here's the crazy part. Well, actually, maybe it's not that crazy when you think about it, but almost half of retirees say the exact same thing. They buy their dream place, and it turns into a total nightmare. So if you're 40 or older, and you've been thinking about that perfect retirement spot, this story might just save you from losing everything. So I'm Jason, by the way. I actually retired early when I was 39. My wife and I, we kept our house here in Indiana. It's paid off, thank God. We live here half the year, and the other half, we're traveling around, well, mostly Southeast Asia, as you can probably tell. That's actually where I met James on a snorkeling trip in Thailand. James had retired at 53, so we actually had tons to talk about. The guy had a good job, made decent money, did everything right. Sounds amazing, right? But this whole retirement home thing, man, it's a story that everyone needs to hear. So by the time we finish talking here, you're going to know about the 3 hidden traps that nobody, not even financial advisors, not real estate agents, nobody wants you to know about. Plus, this weird psychological thing that makes people our age make decisions that they'll hate forever. Anyway, we're having coffee. I think I was drinking Thai tea, actually. And he starts telling me about this place that he bought in Florida. And listen, James isn't some reckless guy who just throws money around. He saved like crazy, invested smart, had his whole fire number worked out to the penny. But when it came to this house, he made the same mistakes that are destroying people our age. So the first mistake, and this one's brutal, he fell for what I call the Pinterest retirement trap. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You see these perfect little communities online, or you visit some gorgeous weekend when everyone's playing pickleball, looking happy and relaxed. James told me that he spent 1 weekend at this place and he completely fell in love. He ended up signing papers within a month. 1 month. But here's what they don't show you in those pretty brochures. Maintenance costs that'll eat your retirement plan alive. James said he was buying a low maintenance lifestyle. Instead, he was paying $600 a month in HOA fees. Plus, there's these special assessments that come out of nowhere, like financial bombs. Last year alone, they hit him with a $15,000 special assessment for roof repairs. $15,000, just gone. You know what really got to me? James told me this story about his neighbor Carol. She'd been there 8 years. She pulls him aside and says, "Honey, you ain't seen nothing yet." It turns out these special assessments are like financial landmines that just keep going off. The year before James moved in, they replaced all the sidewalks, $3,000 per person. The year before that, the community pool needed major repairs, $800 each. And get this, in the past decade, there hadn't been a single year without some kind of special assessment. Not one. But here's what really gets me mad. Nobody mentioned any of this when he was buying. The sales lady kept talking about, low maintenance living and predictable costs. Meanwhile, the people actually living there were getting hit with massive bills constantly. James showed me a spreadsheet that he made, and this guy's an engineer, remember, so he's thorough, tracking every single expense from the first 2 years there. His affordable monthly payment ended up being almost double what he budgeted for. Double. And that's not even counting the stuff that hasn't been fixed yet. He told me, "Jason, if I'd known the real numbers, I never would have bought this place." But they don't give you the real numbers. They give you the fantasy numbers. Real quick, if you're getting something out of hearing stories like this, you should probably subscribe. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just want to save you from the mistakes crushing people like us. So James's story actually gets worse. Because mistake number 2, and this one will make you question every retirement calculator that you ever looked at. James bought too much house. And I don't mean square footage. I mean financial commitment. See, when you're 45 and pulling in good money, that mortgage payment feels manageable. But James forgot something really huge. Your income in retirement isn't just lower, it's oftentimes fixed. So when the AC unit dies and you need 12 grand for a new one, when property taxes jump 30% in 2 years, when inflation is eating everything, that affordable payment becomes an anchor around your neck. James went from financial freedom to house poor in retirement. Now he's 57 years old, sitting in Thailand because it's cheaper than living in his dream retirement home. Think about that for a second. Oh, and here's something else that James told me that I'll never forget. So he's trying to sell this place, right? Because he's basically drowning financially now. And his real estate agent, the same one who sold it to him, by the way, she looks at him and says, "Well, James, retirement communities are really hard to sell." Wait, what? Nobody mentioned that when he was buying. Turns out when you buy one of these places, you're not just buying a house. You're buying into this super narrow market. I mean, who wants to buy a house where you have to be 55 or older? You've basically cut like 70% of potential buyers right off the bat. James had his house in the market for, I think it was 6 months, and the offers he got were insulting. People knew he was stuck, so they lowball him constantly. One guy offered him $60,000 less than what he paid. And that was after James had already lowered the price a couple of times. But here's the part that really made me angry for him. While his house is just sitting there, those HOA fees and maintenance costs, they keep piling up. So now he's paying for a house that he can't sell in a place he doesn't want to live while watching his retirement savings just bleed away month after month. James told me that he felt trapped in a way that he never experienced before. He said, "Jason, I've been broke before when I was young, but this is different. When you're broke at 25, you know you can work your way out of it. But when you're broke at 57 with a house you can't sell, that's terrifying." James said that he started having panic attacks for the first time in his life. He'd wake up at 3 a.m. doing math in his head, trying to figure out how long his money would last. I mean, here's a guy who'd been so careful with his finances, who'd done everything right, suddenly facing the possibility of having to go back to work in his 60s just to survive. But here's the mistake that really got him, and this one's gonna hit you hard. He bought the wrong location for his retirement psychology. Now I'm about to tell you something about those 55 plus communities that everyone thinks is paradise. But first, what scares you more about retirement? Running out of money or running out of purpose? Because what I'm about to share connects both of those fears in a way that will totally change how you think about retirement. Let me know in the comments below. So James bought into one of those age-restricted communities. Sounds perfect, right? No kids running around, everyone's your age, built-in social life. But here's a statistic that real estate people will never tell you. Depression rates in 55 plus communities are 40% higher than in regular neighborhoods. 40%. James told me that within 6 months, he felt like he was living in a waiting room for death. Everyone talking about their medications, their doctor's appointments, who died last week. He said it was like being trapped in a bubble where the only things that people talked about were health problems and grandkids that they see twice a year. And here's where it gets financially devastating. When you're depressed and isolated, you make terrible money decisions. James started spending just to feel something, you know? Online shopping, expensive hobbies he didn't even care about, trips that he couldn't afford. Because when your environment is sucking the life out of you, you'll do anything to feel alive again. And here's something else that really broke my heart about James's story. James told me about this guy named Bob who lived 2 doors down. Bob was 72 and lost his wife the year before James moved in. This poor guy would just wander around the community every single day looking for someone to talk to. Just desperate for human attention, you know? And James said that Bob would show up at his door every morning at like 7 a.m. with his coffee, just wanting to chat. And James felt bad, but honestly, Bob was depressing to be around. All he wanted to talk about was his dead wife, his health problems, and how his kids never called him. James started avoiding him, which made James feel terrible about himself, which made everything worse. But here's the thing that really hit me. James realized that he was looking at his own future. He was 55, single, and if he stayed in that place for 20 years, well, he'd become Bob. just wandering around desperate for someone to care about him, boring the hell out of anyone that would listen. James told me that he'd lie awake at night thinking, is this it? Is this what I worked 30 years for? He said it felt like being in this weird limbo where you're too young to give up on life, but too old to start over. And everyone around him seemed totally fine with just existing, playing the same card games, having the same conversations, watching the same reruns on TV. And the worst part, James is actually a really interesting guy. He traveled to like 40 countries for work, speaks 3 languages, and he has all these amazing stories. But in that community, none of that mattered. He was just another retiree counting down the days. He told me, I started to forget who I was. I'd catch myself complaining about the weather or talking about my cholesterol levels, and I'd think, when did I become this person? Man, that gave me chills when he said that. The truth James figured out, way too late, is that retirement homes aren't just real estate decisions. They're identity decisions. And if you get it wrong, you don't just lose money, you lose yourself. Here's what happened to James that nobody warned you about. He went from being this dynamic guy with a career and purpose to being, what? A retiree in a retirement community. His entire identity became his age. His whole social circle became people whose main activity was comparing their declining bodies and shrinking bank accounts. The financial stress from the house, combined with the psychological prison of that community, created this downward spiral. He couldn't afford to leave because he was house poor, but staying was destroying his mental health, which was destroying his ability to make good financial decisions. So, what did James do? Well, he eventually ended up renting out the house. He barely breaks even after taxes and maintenance. And now he's living in Southeast Asia where his retirement dollars stretch way further and where he actually feels alive again. But here's a lesson that could save your entire retirement. James wishes that he'd done this analysis before he bought that place. First, he should have calculated the true cost of ownership. Not just the mortgage, but maintenance, taxes, insurance, HOA fees, and those killer special assessments. Then he should have added 20% for all the stuff that you never see coming. Second, he should have rented in that community for at least 6 months before buying. See how it feels in January when it's cloudy and half the neighbors have gone back north. See how it feels when you're not in vacation mode anymore. Third, and this is huge, he should have asked himself, what kind of person do I want to be in retirement? Because your environment shapes who you are way more than you think. If you want to be active, engaged, growing, learning, maybe that age-segregated community isn't for you. Maybe you need to be around people of all ages. Maybe you need a place where you can still contribute and feel relevant. And James told me something that really hit me hard. He said, I spent my whole life working toward financial independence so I could have choices. Then I used that independence to buy a prison. Look, I'm not telling you this story to scare you away from retirement planning. I'm telling you this because the stakes are just too high to get it wrong. You've got one shot at retirement, and if you mess up on housing decisions, you might not get a chance to recover. If this story saved you from making a costly mistake, do me a favor and subscribe. I'm not selling courses or any of that stuff. I'm just sharing the real stories and hard truths that nobody else is talking about. Thanks for watching.